Mableann Hawthorne. I was born and raised in this area. Started out in Fruita on 20 Road, where my parents, Charlie and Mamie Post, lived. They was born in Grand Junction at the old osteopathic hospital on 12th Street. And then I came home with Mom and Dad, and we lived on 20 Road and until I was 3 years old, and my younger sister Linda was born. And we lived, then we moved down to New Liberty on 7 Road. We moved to the original McKay place on 7 Road in a little house that was supposed to be 2 rooms, but it was just all one big room. And we lived there, moved there with my dad's big thrashing machine, and it was the case of many weeks of moving down there, because it was 16 miles from 20 Road to the 7th Road residence. It was early in the spring, or else late in the winter when we moved there, and there was about 4 inches of snow on the ground. And Mom and Dad always talked about if they had bought that place in the springtime or in the summertime when the snow wasn't on the ground, they could have seen all the alkali that was there. They lived in Fruita, and both of their families had lived in Fruita for a long time, and there wasn't that much alkali. But the south part and the western part of that place was not drained, and so there was alkali, which my dad fussed about, and he couldn't drive over there because he could get stuck. But anyway, he was a farmer, a very good farmer, and that's pretty much the story of my family getting started in New Liberty. I have 3 younger sisters, and in 1957 we moved from the 7 Road over to our road on the hill in what was originally the Gary place. Anyway, then I'm going to go back to my mother's family, because that's a good place to start. They were the Kettles and Hulls, Kettles and Smiths, that started in Salt Lake, Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah, when the Smith family came in a wagon cart across the United States with Hannah, who was 7, and her little brother Samuel, and then their older brother and their mother named Judith. And so they walked all the way across the United States to settle in with the Mormons, LDS church. And then the Smith brothers came from Wisconsin down there with their mules and freight wagons, and they hauled freight all their lives. That was what they did. Anyway, so Hannah Kettle married Oscar David Smith, and they moved all the way from Salt Lake, in the Salt Lake area, all the way over to Wet Mountain Valley with their big freight wagons. And when I go through that country now on a nice road, I can't imagine how they could have done that back in the 1800s. Anyway, they settled in Wet Mountain Valley, and that's where they had the first 3 of their 8 children. And then and they were hauling freight between Gunnison and Uray, because they were both, Uray was a mining town. Anyway, in 1902, they settled in the Wet Mountain Valley, which is over there above the San Luis Valley. And eventually, the government moved the Ute Indians away from the Montrose Kelowna area over to Uray, Utah. And the Smith family by that time had 7 children, and the Ute Indians that were still there, they didn't all go. There were still Ute Indians that would come by and visit with Hannah Kettle and the Kettle family, and Smith family. And they had, at that time, the Smith family had, the two brothers were there. And one brother settled south of Kelowna, and the Oscar Davis family, which is my mother's relatives, they settled right across the Uncompahgre River from the main highway in Kelowna. And so my mother, when she was a little child, would go over there on the other side of the river where the Indians still had wickiups. And they could go over there. The Indians weren't living there then, but they left their wickiups, and they'd go over there and explore around there. They were just little kids because Mom had 42 first cousins, which means that she had a lot of people to play with. There were all kinds of brothers and sisters on the Hull side, which we'll get to, who was settled there. And then the Kettles, there were lots of Kettle cousins that also had children. So when they got together, it was like a whole community. It was like, I don't know, hundreds of people in some of those pictures of where they had family gatherings, like Thanksgiving or whatever it would be. Anyway, then on my mother's father's side, Adam Hull's side, they moved there in 1902 and bought a big ranch just right close to the Oscar Davis family. So they built, the Smith family had built a big house, which still stands up there in that country. After you cross over the Uncompahgre, there at the Kelowna store, there's a little road that goes down there that a lot of people don't know about, and they wonder how in the devil those people got across the river because that little road wasn't really noticeable. But anyway, you get on that little road and cross over there, and about a half a mile apart is the Smith family's big house, and then down the road just a little bit farther is the Hull family big residence. And they had, in that family, they had 9 children. And so they had all kinds of relatives that lived around there. The whole family was more into sheep, and they raised lots of sheep. And the fall, they would bring the ewes and the lambs over to Eckert, where they had bought some land, and fatten up the lambs, and then they'd separate the lambs from the mothers and send them on over to Denver, to the big stockyard over there in cattle cars, and up through the Black Canyon of the Gunnison on that railroad. So it was quite an experience living up there in Kelowna and on up towards Dallas Divide, and all that country up in there was where the Kettles and the other side of the Smith family had their people. The mom's grandmother and grandfather had their cattle range up the edge of Horsefly, and Horsefly is part of the Mount Sniffles area. And then at the bottom of it, they had big hay fields and so forth. And anyway, that's probably enough of that, because there's all kinds of stories about that side of the family up there in the Montrose Museum. And now we'll go to my father's side of the family, which was very interesting, because William Henry Post lived in Wisconsin with his mother and stepfather. Stepfather's name was Tom Boyd. And William Henry Post and Tom Boyd rode horseback down to this part of Colorado with the idea, I think, of getting a new start. They were both horsemen, and they rode all the way down and came over and looked over into the little town of Fruita from the Book Cliffs, and then rode down and got started, and that was in 1886. My grandfather had a livery stable that he built, or put together, I should say, in the southwest corner of the Circle Park. And he also had a lot of, he had a crew, a construction crew that he'd take around. And one of the places he worked on was the dam up the Uinta Canyon. He worked on the Black Bridge that crosses the Grand River on the south part of Grand Junction. He had a work crew that he took over to Salt Lake when they were building that big highway into the Salt Lake area. Anyway, he was something. He was a big, tall Dutchman, and he was very busy. He had the first original patent on the Horse Thief Canyon Ranch, and all down to this area and different places, you can see W.H. Post written on different places, like in the rocks above, hole in the wall down there in south of Moab, in the rocks high above Steamboat Rock up there in the Echo Canyon, up in the dinosaur area. He was a very busy person, and in 1902 he opened a livery stable up in Ouray. He and his stepfather, and they worked together, and they had that livery stable up there for quite a long time until, of course, the invention of cars, and that kind of wiped out the business of having stables and livery stables for people to keep their horses in and rent horses and so forth. Anyway, he and my grandmother moved up to Grand Junction in 1904, and then my dad, Charlie Post, was born in their house there where the police station is, now in Grand Junction. And he could remember watching the train unload the elephants, and Wild Bill Hickok coming into town for a show there where the Files ground is, which I'm not sure what that road is, but anyway, that's where the circuses and the shows were on in Grand Junction. Anyway, he was right in the thick of it. I have pictures of him as a little kid. Then when he was about 5 years old, somewhere along in there, his parents, Anna Post and Bill Post, divorced, and Anna Post, in the meantime, had become a cook down at the Beanery. She cooked at the Beanery, she cooked at the Le Carte Hotel, and she would cook at different events, like when they used to shear the sheep, they'd need a cook to keep the crew busy, or keep the crew fed, so they didn't have to stop and go home and come back. But anyway, she was a cook, and she cooked at the Mac railway station restaurant. Anyway, and so she was born in 1877, and lived in Grand Junction her whole life. She had 4 children: Bessie Florence, Mabel Maud, Vera Maud, Uncle Bill, William Aubrey Post, and Charles Clifford Post. Anyway, I need to go back a little bit, because the Coulters came from Pennsylvania in the German Lutheran towns. They were my great-grandfather, Samuel Lindsay Coulter, who's buried in the cemetery here at the Elmwood Cemetery, fought in the Civil War, and it was hard on him and his lungs, and so the doctor told him that he should come out west, and so his wife Elizabeth, I'm assuming, had some correspondence with somebody here who said that there was some land for sale on the corner of 20 and K Road. And so they bought that place in 1889 and came all the way out from Pennsylvania to live in that house. And the house is still there that they moved into. And so Samuel Lindsay and Elizabeth Alter Coulter lived there until both of their deaths in the 1900s. My dad and his brother and sisters, younger brother, the three younger children of Anna and Bill Post moved into Fruita again, came back home to Fruita when their parents divorced, and lived here in the house with the grandparents, and went to school in the Hunter area. So they knew all the people that lived there, and they were well established. And then Mom's people, Mom and her mother and her twin sister moved from Kelowna with in a horse and buggy. It took them overnight, so they spent the night in the desert there west of Delta, and then they came down to 20 Road, which was an enclave of the Kettles that lived there. Samuel's family had settled there. So they stayed there with the Kettles till they found a place to live, and Charlie Hull was a thrasher, and that meant that he would haul his big thrashing machine all around Kansas and with his Percheron horses and thrash those big fields of grain like they did in the old days. And so he'd be gone for months on end out there taking care of the grain and so forth. But he knew how to load his horses and the big thrashing machine on to the little railroad that came from Montrose, or they cut it in Montrose and came down and unloaded it there in Grand Junction. It must have been something. I'd love to have seen that. And then hauled it down to the 20 Road house, and then he began harvesting people's grain around here, which he did for a long time. I have pictures of him and his thrashing crew. And let's see. So Mom and Dad both lived in the Fruita area while they were growing up. Mom was 5 years old when she and her twin sister came with their mother, and then that was in 1917, and then of course 1918 is when they had the big flu epidemic, and my grandmother, Mabel, was a practical nurse, which meant that she knew a lot of ways to help people feel better, and would go around and nurse the sick, the people that she got to know, neighbors that were sick and so forth. At the same time, she was pregnant, and she had my Aunt Alice in 1918. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, she knew a lot about things like turmeric and different spices and things that would make people feel better. Anyway, they survived that big flu epidemic here in the Fruita area. Then, let's see, Mom and Aunt Marie went to school in Appleton. That's where they started out. They moved a little closer up there in that Appleton area. And then they moved to Roan. And then, of course, by that time, she was a student here, and they were students here at Fruita Union High School. And then, let's see, in the meantime, on the other side of the family, my Aunt Maud had moved up to Uray and married, and her husband had worked in the mines, and so he got the black lung disease and was very sick, and so they moved down to live with my grandmother, and in the meantime, the great-grandmother had passed away, and so they moved into Fruita, and Aunt Maud and Rosalie lived there with Grandma Post in let's see, I think it was on Carolina Street, something like that. But anyway, as I was a little kid, we lived out there on 20 Road, and I liked to come to Fruita and see my grandmother. And so I was about 3 years old, going down 20 Road, crossed over the canal, and on down the road with my dog. Like this scared Mom and Dad to death because they didn't know that I hadn't fallen in the canal. And anyway, then I got that part done, and I got married. They got married, and we moved down to New Liberty. And so that's kind of an overall view of where my families came from.
You're good.
All right, so now we'll talk a little bit more about myself growing up in New Liberty. In New Liberty at that time, you did not have gravel on the roads. The roads were muddy if it rained, and there was a lot of mud. In fact, it was called the gumboot area because it would stick to your shoes and your boots like mud does. And on 7 Road, halfway between R and S Road is where the house was. So we didn't spend a lot of time out in the road. The house was fairly close to 7 Road, and there was a lateral that you had to cross over to get to the house. And we weren't allowed to go out there by that lateral. So in the meantime, we would just, we had an old Chrysler. Mom and Dad had got, it was like a 48 Chrysler, and it had suicide doors in the back, which meant that it opened out, so you could just get out of the seat and into to get out of the car. And so we had that car, and it was a good sturdy car. And when I was about 5 years old, maybe, and my sister Linda, of course, then would be nearly 3, and Reva was, my next sister, was just a baby. Mom was coming home from town, and she'd got us some balloons, and I said to Mom, I can't make this blow up, and she said, leave it alone till I get home, and I'll blow it up for you. But I saw that handle on that door, and I thought, wow, that'll stretch it. So I put it on there, and the next thing you know, I was I was out there in the borrow pit, rolling around in great force. Mom had slowed down to turn on to 8 Road, and so she wasn't going, 50 miles an hour. She was probably going about 20, but it was enough to fling me out there into the borrow pit, which was a godsend, because if I had put it on the other side and the door opened like that, I would have fallen out on the pavement of 6 and 50. Anyway, I jumped up and started running after Mom, saying, wait, Mom, wait for me. Mom, in the meantime, turned around because, when she stepped on the brake, when she saw the door open like that, Linda fell on the floor because she was about half asleep on the back seat, and my sister Reva rolled off the front seat onto the floor. And so there was Mom with 2 babies in the car crying their hearts out, and somebody who was badly hurt on the road. When she got the car turned around there on 8 Road corner and headed back towards me, she could see that I was limping, and she thought, oh no, she's broke her leg. But no, turned out I just lost a shoe. And so she gathered me up and brought me into the hospital here in Fruita, and Dr. Orr bandaged me all up and said I was going to be all right, but I might have a concussion. Anyway, that was just one of the many experiences that my mother and father were put through because of myself and my not knowing how to follow directions and not following directions. Anyway, by that time, I had 3 younger sisters, and I was supposed to be the babysitter taking care of them. And I think to myself, it's a wonder any of us survived, because in 1951, Claude Taylor, who had bought the original Williams and Stout homesteads, was wintering his cows there, and he asked my dad, or he and my dad worked out a plan to have Dad feed the cows in the wintertime and then grow the hay on the place to feed the cows in the summertime. So Dad would go over there every day and feed those cows. And it was hay, there was a hay yard, and he had the haystack in there. It was all loose hay. And so my sister Linda and I would ride along with Dad on our horses, mainly horses that came from Mom's house and my grandmother, and one pinto horse that Claude Taylor had loaned Dad to use to feed the cows. So we'd ride around there like we knew what we were doing, but we're just like 3 and 4 years old. Linda was probably 3, and I was probably maybe 5. Anyway, we'd ride over there with Dad to give Mom a break and, take care of the chores around the place, around the house. So that's one of my earliest memories. And Claude Taylor had a cowboy named Jim Gleese. Jim Gleese was real tall and had blue eyes. And when he came to see us, he would have, maybe half a deer that he'd brought, and he'd hang it in the tree there for us. And then he'd come in the house, and he had to lean down to get in the door. And then he'd grab a chair and turn it around and sit down on it backwards. And so we thought that was real cool. And he'd tell about his adventures up the canyon and how the cows were doing. And then occasionally he'd stop in there and visit and see how Dad was getting along with feeding the cows. But mainly he just left it alone. He was also from the Wet Mountains Valley and had a wonderful tales of growing up over there. He was a real hero to us. And so when Claude Taylor decided that he was going to dissolve his cattle business, he had this old horse that his daughters had raised and trained, whose name was Old Tag. And so he said, I'm sorry, I might have to stop there. I get carried away thinking about that. Anyway, he said to my dad, your girls need a horse, and I have Old Tag. I think he needs a good home, and I think they need a horse. So he gave us Old Tag. Anyway, Claude Taylor told us that we could have Old Tag, and we have a picture of us the very day that he brought Old Tag there. And Mom and Dad were both horse people, and they knew that Old Tag wouldn't move, and so we didn't have a saddle. It was just myself and my 3 younger sisters on him. And it's a prize picture because it's we're sitting on there so casually that as an older person, I can't imagine putting some children on a horse and then walking away. Walking away like that. But if you knew Old Tag, you'd know that he was perfectly safe. He wouldn't move. And so we knew that if we got our chores done and got taken care of, that we could get the bridle, and he wouldn't fight us. He'd let us put it on him, and then we could get by a thing and get on somehow. If they could get me on, well, then I could pull them up. So that was our main workout for the day, taking a ride on Old Tag, and we could ride him all around the place. It was 60 acres there to ride him around, and so that's what we did. And now as we got older, he wasn't quite so cooperative. Mom and Dad would not let us use a saddle. We always had to go bareback because they didn't want us to get our foot hooked in the stirrup and get drug. Anyway, so old Tag wasn't so cooperative as we got older. If you pulled him up beside a fence post, or a fence someplace where you could get on him, well, then he'd move over just about the time you were ready to put your leg over, and there you would be. No horse. Anyway, he was quite an animal, and a wonderful animal. We rode him all around the neighborhood, and everybody knew the post girls on the horse because we all rode him all at once, all four of us. And we'd go up the 7 Road to S Road, and then we could ride back down and go another mile down to our road without getting in too much trouble for Mom and Dad. But as time went along, we grew up and we went farther and farther away. We went over there to the hills to the south, and rode old Tag up them and down them, and went probably all around the neighborhood when you stop and think about it, because there wasn't traffic, and there weren't that many dogs or anything you had to worry about. And you could cut across people's fields because they didn't care. But nowadays you can't do that. Anyway, he was quite a horse, and we had him for, I think, about 30 years. We kept him all that time, and he was well known. Everybody knew the post girls and their horse, and some people would think that maybe their kids should have a horse and should ride him, but the secret was that both Mom and Dad had spent a great deal of time with horses. When Mom's folks had a place up at Colburn, and Mom would ride her horse back and forth between 7th Street and Colburn several times a year. And they drove their cattle up there. And so she knew horses probably as well as any horseman in the area. And my dad, of course, worked in the big ranches out there around in Nevada, and drove those big teams of horses that they harvested hay with and cut hay, and anyway, they both knew horses very well, and so they knew that old Tag was steady enough that he wasn't going to go crazy, and he led him across many adventures also, because down at the bottom of the place was Dad had fixed a bridge finally, so he didn't have to drive all the way around down 7 Road and down S Road to feed the cows. He could cut across, and so he built a bridge out of cottonwood trunks, and then the cross pieces were just logs or just branches across. And we decided that even though we knew we shouldn't do it, that old Tag could cross that because it had some dirt on it. And so we got about halfway across, and old Tag's foot fell in between the branches, in between the little logs, and we all piled off real fast, and said, "Tag, it's yours now." And I was standing over there in the bank, very, very big help, with my hands over my ears and my eyes closed, because I couldn't bear to watch old Tag fall down through the bridge into the wash, into the drain. And next thing I looked over there, and he was already across. He got his foot out and managed to figure out where his feet belonged, and came on across. And I'm telling you, there was some relieved kids, because I can't imagine how we would have been punished if Mom and Dad if anything had happened to old Tag after they told us don't do that. Anyway, there were several things like that. One time, when Everett White had his tomato field just up the road from us, just across from our place, we could go over there and get all kinds of tomatoes. And my sister Reva, she was especially a good good horseback rider. She had old tag, and she went between the fence and the lateral, and the bank gave way, and she and old tag fell in the drop where the water came, where the irrigation water came down through there. And it was probably about 5 feet deep. And she was probably, she must have been about maybe 5 at the most. And she said she could remember getting washed every which way, but she saw old Tag's tail, and she grabbed a hold of it, and he went on down the lateral, and she could get her feet in and get out of it, because the water, after it swirled around down in there, it would go on down the lateral. And so she managed to get out. And that was another big scare. So there was just all kinds of experiences like that we had with old Tag. And he was a wonderful animal. Okay, now let's see. Let's talk some more about getting started with school there at New Liberty, because at that point in time, the bus had high school kids on it, and as well as elementary children. And so I was supposed to catch the bus down there at the end of 7 Road, and in the corner of 7 and R Road, which meant I needed to be down there half a mile. It was about a half a mile. And Mom and Dad had told me ever since I could think about going to school that I had to go to school because the truant officer would come after me if I didn't go to school. And so I should just get myself ready and get down to the road. So I remember so well, I was headed down there. It was plenty of time to catch the bus. And I hated to catch the bus because I always wanted to catch the bus on the corner of 7 and R Road, because by the time it went all the way around the block and you went to S Road, there wasn't any place to sit because there was all kinds of big high school kids, and they were not well. They didn't want to share their seat with you. Anyway, so I was headed down there to 7 and R Road corner, and the bus stopped, and I thought, oh no, now what? So they waited there, and I thought, well, that's weird. But I was going along down there, I was about halfway down there, and this person got off the bus and came running towards me. And I thought, oh no, it's the truant officer. The truant officer's coming after me. And I got a little scared. I probably got about petrified, because I thought, now I've done it. And so I just kind of froze. And the figure got closer and closer. I could see, no, it wasn't a truant officer. It was a big boy. And I thought, oh my gosh, now. But he went right by me. And I thought, I don't know if he saw me. So I went on down to the road there, down the road to the corner, and got on the bus and went on around. The bus went on around the block, and it wasn't a big bus like we have nowadays. There's a good picture of it that would explain. They were smaller and not as high. So anyway, when you got on there, you was like almost getting in a car to what it would be nowadays. So anyway, we went on around the corner there and around the block and came to the other corner, and there was that big boy getting back on the bus. And I thought, well, what in the devil is that all about? Anyway, come to find out, that was Jimmy Dick Tomlinson. And he did that enough. I got used to it. I didn't even pay any attention to him running towards me. But I didn't know he was he was such an athlete. I was just impressed by the way he just was running along. He wasn't trotting, he wasn't walking, he was running. And I thought to myself, wow. And so I think that's when I first got I got my first taste of an athlete, because it said to me, there's a chance to be really physically fit, and inspires you to be that way. Anyway, I went to school at New Liberty, and I had Mrs. Thompson for the first grade. There was David Olstad and Louise Wells, and later on Steve Chaffin. We had Judy Malieu. There was about 5 of us. And we got all the way through the third grade. Then Mrs. Reeves was a wonderful teacher. She was an artist mainly, but she was a wonderful teacher. And then into the upper grades with Mabel Cooper, and then eventually into the junior high. And after coming from a school that were 30 children at most, Fruita Junior High was pure bedlam to me. There was so many people that I was amazed at how everybody knew where to go, and it was like a bunch of ants. The bell rang and everybody just scattered. And you eventually figured out what your room was, which was Mr. Bill Baird. And he and I were great friends from the beginning. And I loved him. He was a good teacher. He was the first man teacher that I had, except I should qualify that by saying Bill McGraw was our physical teacher. I don't know what they called him, I guess, physical teacher. Anyway, he'd come out once a week and give us an idea about being physically fit and organizing into games and so forth. And he's a great, tall, handsome man. And so he showed us how to play softball and dodgeball and basketball and all those kind of games like that we were supposed to practice until he came back next week. And then once a week, Mrs. Hines would show up, and she'd lead us in a rousing chorus of the Wabash Cannonball, which was Steve Chaffin's favorite song. And after we talked about the different notes and trying to sing right and everything, sing the choir and the chorus. Then she'd say, "Okay, now who's got a song they'd like to sing?" And Steve's hands was always first in the air, and so we always sang Wabash Cannonball. And so then she'd come back the next week and give us some more lessons about singing in the chorus and so forth. And then of course we always had our Christmas programs where we had we had to practice songs and so forth, and we had little skits and so forth that we did like that. It's all kinds of memories there. So that's that. Now then I grew up, and then I went into high school and graduated in 1964. Now I think it's time to talk about New Liberty. In 1917, the Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Reclamation, I should say, decided that they were going to fund the rest of the High Line Canal. The High Line Canal was originally funded to go all the way to West Salt Marsh, which is on the other side which would have been on the other side of the Uinta Railroad track that went up through there. But anyway, they didn't fund it only to the Mac Wash. And so then in 1917, after some litigation and different trouble, they got funded enough that they could finish it, and so they began work on it. And in 1917, they had completed it out to Badger Wash with a canal that went on past Badger Wash around over to irrigate the places of, at that point, the Bar X and Tom Kelly's place. Anyway, they had the laterals all built. The canal fed into laterals, and laterals were what took the water down through the country to the farms. And there was a lateral for every mile or so. There would be a lateral, and then the ditch rider, you'd tell the ditch rider you wanted so and so amount of water, and he would put enough water in the canal so that he could open up the lateral and fill the lateral with enough water that the people who were irrigating could use their head gate and open up the head gate and let the water come in. That's where the drops came in. Whenever there was a head gate, there was usually a drop, and the drop was where it was made out of cement. It was like a little narrow place, and you'd back the water up in the canal, in the drop, so that the water would go out through your head gate. Anyway, so then the water would come into your place, and it would go to your head ditch, and then down through your field where you had feeder ditches, and then eventually you would open it up and into the creases. Then after it had gone all the way down through the creases, hopefully, because they were nice and level, and it didn't wash out on over to the next crease, and so you just had a big mud puddle down there at the end of your field. Then it went into the wastewater ditch and back into the drain that would eventually empty into one of the washes, the Badger Wash or the West Salt Wash or East Salt Wash, or even the Mac Wash. So that was the plan, and so they opened the government opened up a lotto system to where you could choose a number, and your number would show your line, your place in line to be able to choose a place that you'd like to have. And so in March of 1918, they opened up the lotto, and people were chosen. People put their numbers in, and they were chosen to be the first to choose the land that they would like. And so then that's where people like John Morrow and the Albert Allstat and his family, and oh gosh, all the original homesteaders got their chance to begin their 60 acres, and it was only 60 acres because it was irrigated, and you were supposed to be able to make a living on 60 acres of sagebrush and greasewood, and level it all off and make sand, basically sand ground, productive with irrigation. And so John Morrow and Albert Allstat and their families, their children were older. The Allstat children were older, and let me see, Malleus, Clem and Mary Malleus, first married. They came down, they got a place to get started. I'm trying to think of all the people now, the Likes, Homer, Reverend Likes and his family. All these people had a chance to get their place chosen and get started with it. Now, they weren't the first ones there, because Robert Cox, had been out there probably maybe 5 or 6 years ahead, but he had not waited for the irrigation water project to get started. He found a place where there was a spring and that came across down out of the desert, and so he figured out how he could level the ground and get started with farming, and he had fruit trees and all kinds of stuff. He had watermelon patches and everything, and that was where later on people would know as where the Roberts people lived, where Chuck Roberts lived. That place was there. And also in the early cattleman days out there, a man named Tom Kelly had built an adobe house at the end of Badger Wash, where Badger Wash gathered the drain water out of the book cliffs, and he would bring his cattle down out of the book cliffs and winter them there. Mind you, there weren't any fences. It was just all open ground, and so he built an adobe house there, and he was quite a person. He was, I don't exactly know when he got started. I'd have trouble finding much about him in his early days, but everybody knew Tom Kelly because he was the only one out there. And then a cattleman that was out there, I should say. There was also people that were sheepmen and they had their sheep over there in Utah, and then they would also graze the desert just past New Liberty. Anyway, New Liberty was formed in 1908 or 1918 because they put the irrigation water in. So if you got your irrigation water out of Camp 8, which was the new camp, then you were New Liberty. That was New Liberty. And New Liberty really is irrigated everything west of the Mac Wash. If you live west of the Mac Wash, you're under the New Liberty, you're under the new land. It wasn't called New Liberty then. You were not part of Mac. You were another community that was getting started, because that was where it was open to irrigation now. Anyway, so that's basically where New Liberty is. Officially, New Liberty is probably where East Salt Wash is, over to West Salt Wash. And up through that country, because that's where it was irrigated from the new system that was put in 1918. So when people say, nowadays, people say in Northwest Mac, that's fine, but also they don't know enough to say that there's a lot of little new communities out there, but the original community that was started in 1918 when they opened it up to homesteading, and you got 60 acres as opposed to 120 acres, and you were supposed to make a living off of a farm out there. Anyway, so they got that lined out, and people up on Hollinger Hill were Roe Saunders and the Collinses, and a lot of people that we know in Fruita have relatives that were connected with what we call Red Mesa, which was above New Liberty. It was almost part of Mac, and in fact, it was a lot closer to Mac because Mac had a school, and they wanted to get started, and it took a little bit for for New Liberty people to get organized enough to have a school and to get some kind of a place to have a school. And then when they got that, then they had, of course, to build a school and get people voted in for the school board and that sort of thing. So there was kind of a lot of organization that needed to happen there, and new neighbors, new people that had come from different places all around the country. Like, for instance, the Morrows came from New York. And these are people that had lived in established houses and had lived in countries that had been established and organized for hundreds of years, or at least many years. And so there they are out here in New Liberty, and in the New Liberty area, we'll say at this point in time, in that area, in basically desert country, and not much wood around because it was desert, and so they'd buy their lumber from the Independent Lumber Company in Mac, and build some sort of a structure to house their family, and then begin to build their houses. And like the Mayhews had their house made out of straw, and people dug into the banks of the hills around for a place to live and get started before they could get their farm started. Anyway, that was in the early 20s. They finally got a New Liberty going, and it was, first of all, it was just a little wooden building, and then they decided they were part of School District 51, and School District 51 told them they needed to have a more substantial building. So they got busy and built what is now the New Liberty School, and it's a big building. It had a very, very, very fine gym floor, and people would come around from all over the valley they had dances there. It was really a fine building that they built, and it still is. And it was 2 rooms, 2 classrooms, and a stage, and a kitchen. And so they got all started, and Mrs. Morrow was the cook, and you'd go to school. They had a little, if you lived close enough, you could walk to school, but for the most part, they had kind of an old car, I think it was, till they got a bus. They'd go around, pick up kids, and go to school. And so that was where people, for the first generation that were born there, that's where they went to school. The Mableann kids, Daryl and his 3 younger sisters, Phyllis and Marilyn, and the older one, I can't think of her name right now, which is aggravating. But anyway, they had been born and raised there, and so some more families that were there and got started were the Pachecos. The Pachecos were people who came from Somerset up there, where the mines were. 2 brothers, and they brought their families down there. All along, when you turn off of Highway 50, 6 and 50, and go up 8 Road, on one side of the road was the Daly's place, Daly's place, I should say, and then on the other side was a man whose name was Owings, and he had that 60 acres, and so the Dalys were they were an established family, and they got started there off that place, and the kids could either go to school at New Liberty or walk to Mac. And so they're listed in the book. The book is a wonderful thing. I should talk more about the book, because in 1991, the children that were born there or came as young people when their parents homesteaded got together, and this is people like Gene Thomas, who was the editor for the Fruita Times at that point in time, Lewis Likes, Homer Likes, the Pollock children, the Mableann children. They all got together and said to themselves, we need to have a reunion. So they got busy and got everybody organized, and everybody that had gotten started there in New Liberty when it was a new country contributed something to it, and it's a wonderful thing. We had newspapers. Gene Thomas kept his newspapers full of stories that people had written in and told about. Anyway, that's how I got started, being more involved in the history of New Liberty. I always loved that country, and it's where I grew up. Anyway, in 1997, Homer and Phyllis finally published their book called Route 1 Mac, Colorado, and it's Route 1 Mac, Colorado because New Liberty never had a post office. And so we always had to get our mail through the Mac post office. And so it's kind of a misnomer unless you know what the story is. The rest of this book is a thick, it's a big, heavy book, but it has the stories, all the stories about New Liberty. It begins with talking about the history of Mac. It tells about how the water got put in, how that happened. It's a wonderful book. And so anything that I have missed in my short time in New Liberty, I can check the book because they spent 10 or 12 years going around interviewing people and getting pictures and doing research through the school district and churches and everything else to be able to put this book together. It's a wonderful gift. And now their descendants have decided to get it reprinted. And it's wonderful news because you can also get it with the on the internet. You can get subscribed to it. Great big canal that crosses over 20 Road. But one of the neighbors had fallen in there as a child, and I didn't know that. He was probably maybe, I don't know, he must have been 10 years old or something like that. And that was Cutler. What was his name? Anyway, they managed to save him, but he was always had a hard time learning and so forth. I can't think of his name right now, but he lived out there with us, and we all knew it. But I didn't realize that he'd fallen. He actually fell in that canal, and was hurt, terribly hurt by it. And so anyway, no, I didn't. I was merrily walking down the road with my dog when Mom and Dad came to and realized that I'd not only crossed that canal, but I'd gone at least a mile down 20 Road towards L Road. And they thought they'd seen everything in their years. My mother was 32 when I was born. My dad was 40. And they thought they'd lived their lives. But no, no, they had barely get started. What was to come? I'm not kidding you. And anyway, because none of this would be possible if someone hadn't decided we need a place. There's so many interesting things that have happened here in Fruita, in my life, she would say, that need to be recorded. Her name's Yvonne Peterson, and I owed her a debt of gratitude because she was smart enough and wise enough to get something started in Fruita that is a miracle in my book. And I'd like to remember her, and I'd like to salute her crew that works all the time to put these kind of things together. It's not something that just happens automatically. Your history is every day. Today's happenings are tomorrow's history. And the thing that you need to remember is somewhere along the line, somebody's going to be wanting to know about my grandmother. But nobody wrote anything about her. Nobody saved any papers. They didn't keep the family history together. It went with one cousin and then another cousin, or some uncle took several scrapbooks, and we can't get them now. But if you do have them and you don't know what to do with them, bring them to the history room, the heritage room here in Old Central Elementary School in Fruita. New Liberty and all the little schools around would come to Central School here to play day. And so it was an amazing thing to come to Central and see such a big school. Such a big school with all kids, so many kids running around in the playground was all gravel. And I thought to myself, I don't want to fall down. I could get badly hurt in this gravel. But we played kickball and everything that was outside. Maybe some kind of a game where you were supposed to run to one side and dodgeball, that kind of stuff on that play day. And I felt like if I came back without falling down and getting trampled, that I'd had a successful play day. Anyway, I salute the Heritage Room, and I thank you for all of your diligence in keeping us keeping our history. And I'd like to say that somewhere along the line, we need to write an addendum to this book, because this thing was put together, probably published in, I think it was published in early 1997. And the amazing amount of things that have happened out there in New Liberty since then need to be recorded too. The people that talked about what happened to them, where they went, how they lived, and where they passed needs to be recorded to finish up the story, because this is just the beginning, and New Liberty has changed so much now with a lot of money in it, that it would be a wonderful thing if we could get some interest in putting together the next story of New Liberty, and that would be my hope for the Wow Country. Okay, that ought to be enough.
Awesome.